I followed the normal programming, which was do this, buy this, perceive to be look like this. If you look like this, you'll get here, and it was all that, and I tried all that.
Influencing the thinking of billions of people every year. They are the thought leaders, educators, and extroverts. Meet the minds behind the microphones, the experts who share from the stage, encouraging us to think differently, do more, and strive to succeed. Welcome to the #Keynote Speaker Show. Finbar, welcome to #Keynote Speaker.
Awesome, great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Such an honour to have you because I find you very interesting.
Well, I try and find myself interesting as well.
Well, I think what it is, what I'm trying to say, and that's a compliment.
Yeah.
You think different, to caption Steve Jobs' phrase or Apple's phrase. And I think, we're in a world where everyone's trying to mimic everyone else. That it's great to see someone who's different. And I'd love to explore that with you today.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
What is it that drives you to be different, and the benefits that come from it when people are basically being themselves rather than trying to fit in with everyone else.
Sure. Well, it's sort of interesting because me understanding the power of different came from a lot of trials and tribulations and prototyping and testing this thing called life. And when I was young, my accountant said to me, I was like 18, he goes, "You're unemployable." And I got really offended by that. I was like, "What are you talking about?" I didn't realize at the time he was paying me the greatest of compliment. And in a lot of respects, I was unemployable. Who's going to employ me, right? Because I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in at school. And I always thought there was something wrong with me. When I was young, I used to do lots of dancing and TV commercials and things like that. And I found that I was always teased and stuff like that. But I was like, it actually made me stronger. I think it can either make you stronger or make you weaker. And I was like, look, I don't care. My parents were amazing. They were like, just, Finn, do whatever you want. My parents weren't like super successful, but they were just in terms of, your typical sort of definition of success. But they were amazing, and so they sort of really helped guide me. But I followed the normal programming, which was do this, buy this, perceive to be look like this. If you look like this, you'll get here, and it was all that. And I tried all that, and I went from bands and touring into advertising and owning agencies, and it was like I kept criticizing myself, going, how come I keep changing? I don't stick with anything. I've got this insatiable thirst for learning, and I get bored really easy. And when I was young, before ADD was a thing, I was like called hyperactive, and I still got a lot of energy, but it's just natural energy. And so how I got to this understanding different was kept trying to do the things the way that society said should work, and they didn't work. And in the end, I sort of got to a low, and I was like, whatever, I'm just going to do what I want to do. The funny thing that happened for me was when I really, and I didn't say it, when I believed it, I was like, I don't care anymore. Things started happening for me. It was like, people started going, how can I be like him? What's he got? So it went from everyone criticizing me to people wanting to be like me. And I started to then really work on that and put energy into figuring out why are we taught to act one way and criticize another way, but if you step outside of it, but when you do step outside of it, you realize it's not that scary. And actually, and all these things start happening. And I started looking at Edward de Bono and lateral thinking. I started studying different ways of thinking, critical, lateral, design thinking, and I started then applying that to business, my life, my music, and everything just exploded because I saw behind the curtain, and the curtain of programming, which is go to school, get this job, look this way, marry this person, get into this debt, have this perception, have this beautiful perceived life, whereas deep down you're lost. And for me it was, I tried that and I was lost, and I was like, I can try something else, because what have I got to lose? And so the byproduct of where I am now, I consider myself incredibly successful. I wake up every day and I decide whatever I want to do. I travel the world, I've done amazing things, little badges that people value. For me, it's just stuff. But so I understood by just like the work people put into going to work, I put work into figuring out the power of different and why the psychology of people that resist? Why do people have belief systems that say this is the way it is, and they don't even really know, and they'll stand behind it, and they'll even go to war over it, or they'll fight over it, or they'll lose a marriage over it. I'm like, it's just a thing. And so I started trying to look at that without getting too deep into psychology or any of that airy-fairy stuff. I just wanted simple. Like, I wanted the 80-20 Pareto law. I just want to work out if there's something in this pattern. So in music, I'm a musician, built software. I always look for patterns. And the work I do today is when I help organizations and people, it's like, how do we figure out the artifacts in your life? In a lot of the workshops I do, I mention Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
And I say, who here likes Raiders of the Lost Ark? And people put their hands up. And I say, well, let's look at this typical scenario of Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a goodie somewhere in the world whose parents have died and they've got an artifact. And there's a baddie, and the baddie's got an artifact. The baddie's got 1,000 slaves working, digging up a mountain, trying to find the treasure. Somehow the goodie goes looking for the treasure, the baddie captures the goodie, the baddie gets 2 pieces of the puzzle and now knows where the artifact is. Then they go on this journey. Now that's the journey of life. Things hit you at all times. So for me, I know I'm rabbiting on here, but there is this sort of elephant with the string tied around its leg principle that I believe in, that a lot of people that come to me are really struggling because they don't know who they are anymore. Mm-hmm. They're so overloaded with information. They're bought up into the argument rather than looking at the outcome. They don't have any gratitude. They're always in fear. They're always the me have or I don't have. And once you can get on the other side of that, it's a completely different mindset. And just, I don't know.
And do you think, because you and I grew up pre-social media.
Sure.
And, and I've got 2 kids now, 2 girls. And, I'm very conscious about explaining to them about what it is and how they need to look at it and evaluate it themselves rather than be romanced by it and fall in love with it. You yourself were talking about this moment where you wanted to be almost an individual and break from the mould that school puts us through and the work
society
system puts us through.
Yeah.
And the moment that you were brave enough to say, you know what, I actually believe it rather than I just want it, your life changed. And I think we see that a lot in this, at the moment, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Everyone wants to be a keynote speaker. Everyone wants to wear jeans and sports shoes and drive fast cars. Right? That's the perception of winning nowadays. What was it that took you from wanting and believing? What did you need to do?
So it was, I had to hit my bottom. I had to get to a point.
Not literally, folks.
No, not Monty Python bottom, but just No, actually, I had to be broken, and I had to try till a point where I went, you know what? And there's a famous saying: the most dangerous person is someone who's got nothing to lose. And I got to a point where I tried. I was nearly bankrupt. I was working my butt off, and I was like, this is just not working for me. And I was like, you know what? If I have nothing, I've still got my partner. And then I started looking at gratitude. I started looking at the things I have. And I started to actually take the pressure off my shoulder of all the things that I thought I needed to be, because I started to break it down to, look, I give up. And that was the inflection point for me. And, whether you're in addiction or anything where people are sort of totally besotted by an ideology, it does get to a breaking point. From my perspective, and I can't speak for anyone else, I'm so intense on things, I had to get to that point before I went, okay, I'm going to reboot. So the way I looked at it was, I've got a head that's full of viruses. It's like my computer. My brain is my neck-top computer, as Edward de Bono calls it. And my brain is full of viruses that society put there. So I'm going to actually start to run a virus check on my brain. I'm going to start questioning all this stuff. And that's what I did. And I started going, hang on a second, what if I do this? So I tried things. I had little experiments. And, and they ran right through being a startup to a scale up to my personal life. I just try little things that I thought that the person who was, wanted something or we wanted to work together, I would just do something a little bit to see if they would actually really want it or not. And that was so I would do these little social experiments all the time. And that was sort of, and then I started realizing this is actually quite fun, breaking the system. Yeah. But I find, you talked about social media. I'm really passionate these days is to help people from, not just young people, but older people trying to rediscover their lives. You see, I honestly believe that the value of creative thinking, creativity, disparate pattern recognition, uh, is going to become a super valuable sort of human trait in the future
Yeah.
because of the logic based AI. And look, people go, it'll take my job, it won't take my job. Don't be in fear. It's things are going to change and are going to evolve. And I believe thinking needs to evolve. If you run a logic based thought process that can be easily replicated, it's now's a good time to start thinking, hey, there are other ways to start looking at how do I start to question things? How do I start to think, I hate the term outside the box, but what are the frameworks I can use and how can I develop my creativity? Because people think creativity is playing guitar, but I look at guitar and music as hieroglyphics. It's a coded language, just like life. And so, how do we figure out the patterns in our lives? We all have patterns. Where are the valuable bits and where are the non-valuable bits? And just by doing that, you start a process of elimination. It's like a mental diet. So it's easy to say, oh, let's just start thinking differently and the power of different, but you've got to get on the bus somehow. And people go, oh, I just want to be different now. And it's like, it's like going to the gym. A little bit at a time, start practicing. It's also very safe because you start doing it, you start realizing actually there's nothing to lose here.
Yeah. So let's talk about you delivered a TEDx in 2019.
Yep.
It was really well received by people.
Yep.
I was there. I loved it. How has that changed things for you? Because looking at you, you look like you'd be an awesome keynote speaker, and is that something you want to explore? Because you do have a message that's different to reach more people.
Well, it's a really interesting question. I love being able to communicate something that I think hasn't been amplified, and something that is so simple that if you apply it, I think it's a life hack, to be honest. And I love talking about it. This metadata tag, keynote speaker, whatever, that's cool. I am a hacker on everything. So what does that mean? Like, for me, it's if I can share my message and I can get it out in a truthful way, still reflects who I am, I'm down. I think there's something important that people need to hear. Whether that's being a keynote speaker, whether it's being an MC, whether it's just getting up at a youth detention center, whether it's whatever it is, I'm down. I just think that personally, I believe, and I know this from enough people coming to me who are very successful in their own right, but they don't feel successful. I just think that there's a lot in life that we haven't explored, and I just think that there are weird people like me who have challenged the system and actually doing okay. And there's interesting knowledge to get from all sorts of weird people. And it's really quite interesting. A couple of times when I've been CTO of organizations, in one organization, one of the first hires that I hired was a person that no one would hire just because it was a male, female, gender neutral person. And that person was amazing, but people couldn't see behind that. And that person was unbelievably valuable to that business. And so it's that people want to be different, but they go, oh, I better not talk to that person, or I better not go into that shop, I better not do that. Well, that's part of being different, right? It's when you start to just take the programming off your eyes, you might find that there's some really amazing, interesting people out there. But it might be things that you might put yourself into scenarios that you would never in before. That's part of that exploration process,
Yeah, I have a bit of a campaign, and I don't know if you share my view or not, but Get Rich Gonna Make You a Millionaire Facebook experts.
Right.
And I'm fascinated by how people are drawn to them as a honeypot.
Yeah.
When, if you actually step back and look at it, I can help you build a 7-figure ad agency with Facebook ads. And it's like, really? Well, where's your 7-figure ad agency? It doesn't exist. And so that sort of stuff, being a former journalist, I get very skeptical. I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist, but I'm also highly skeptical. And I see two narratives running in the world at the moment, especially among young kids who are trying to, buck the system a little bit, is if you want to be successful in business, you have to have systems, and these are the steps you have to take. Yet the businesses that are highly successful are the ones
that, as you coined the phrase, or didn't coin the phrase, but didn't want to use the phrase, thought outside the box and did think something differently. You mix that into your comment earlier, which is the real value in life is going to be creativity, because AI and other things are going to come and take the mundane, repetitive jobs. But these guys are selling success on doing those repetitive jobs.
Well,
How much more valuable is creativity coming?
Well, so there's two really interesting things that I'd like to talk to on that. One is that people think being creative and outside the box means no frameworks. So I work with some of the largest companies in Australia, and I teach them, and I work with their boards and their organisations around understanding future value, the impact that transformation and disruption is going to have on their business, and how do they cultivate innovation. And it's all new stuff in a way, and some of it's protection. The issue that I find is that people think that that's just, oh, you just come up with ideas. It's nothing further from the truth. And actually, I think people have treated innovation like that. Let's just sit around and think about ideas. If you don't validate an idea, you don't run it through a process or a framework, the chances of the innovation being successful are very, very low. So on one hand, having the creative, the lateral, the disparate, the divergent and convergent thinking type processes, they should still be run by frameworks, but the frameworks need to be agile enough that it allows, and that's part of that art, is understand the nuance between creativity and still keeping it within a framework, so it doesn't go off the rails and become some esoteric sort of like, hole that you go into that you just lose your direction. I strongly believe in understanding what a North Star is, that a North Star defined on value to customers or to the people that you're connecting to, but then it's that, how do we do that in new and unique and different ways? So that's talking about really trying to just make sure that people understand that creativity isn't just some blasé thing where you sit around on beach balls and you come up with ideas.
Yeah.
There is processes and frameworks, proper ones, that people who have done it, like you said, the 7-figure guy, I often say to people, if you're going to jump out of a plane and you've got two guys standing next to you, one is a consultant who's got a briefcase and will write you a 300-page report on how you jump out of the plane, or the guy that jumps out of the plane every day, who do you trust?
Yeah.
Well, in terms of innovation, creativity, execution, I'm the guy that jumps out of the plane every day.
Yeah.
And so I think there's more of those people coming into the market that is disrupting that consulting space. On the other comment that you mentioned around their 7-figure top 10 things, I mentioned this in another thing that I did on the ABC. A lot of people ask me, how do I get a Ferrari? How do I get the 7 figures? How do I do this? And I don't believe in top tips. I believe in one tip. And I go, so you like top tips because it's simple, right? I'm going to give you one tip which is going to transform your life and get you that 7-figure income, get you a Ferrari. But the problem is you're not going to believe me if I tell you. And they go, what do you mean? I go, it's tried and true. I've achieved those things, right, that you're talking about. So I know from experience. So here it is, the one thing. What you have to do to achieve all of that success and more is do one thing, and it is make sure everyone you meet leaves with more than you take.
Yeah,
and people go, what? And I go, think about it. If people come to you and you're thinking about them and the value you're creating for them, they want to be around you more. You get better deals. Things happen for you. You're in the right cliques. You get invited to the right parties. All of this stuff happens because you're creating more value for them. And that's how you start getting value back. When you're trying to be me, everyone's in the me headspace. Yeah. I call it the we headspace, not the me headspace.
Yeah.
It's that, how can we create value together?
Yeah. That's great advice. And really, really important.
Really simple. And back to my TED Talk, the complexity of simplicity. It is very hard today to be simple.
Yeah.
And people think simple is not worth anything.
Yeah.
Simple is way harder to do and way more, it's way more valuable than being complex, in my mind.
Well, I think the iPhone's a great example of that, right? So, the iPhone came out at the time when BlackBerry was the #1 phone.
Yep.
And BlackBerry, I had a BlackBerry. It had the QWERTY keyboard all over it. It had the little ball that used to get dust in it that couldn't work.
Yep.
It had all these applications that wasn't strong enough to run. And yet the iPhone came out and it's this sleek, one piece of glass, one button, and everyone's like, man, what's going on? And it's your telephone, right? It's your encyclopedias, it's your whole music collection, it's every photo you've ever taken. It's like... It was simple. It's in your pocket. Yeah. I think that's really important. One bit I want to get on, talk to you about in particular is you present as different. That's who you are. And I presume that you'd come up against a lot of resistance in the system because you don't look like your typical consultant. You don't look like your typical advisor. So you must be really good at communicating your message. So for the people who are watching this, most of the audience here are going to be people who want to become speakers. And being a speaker, I think, is being a better communicator.
Yeah.
And the better a communicator you are, the more people are going to be prepared to listen to you and take that advice on. I'm a big one of not believing that everyone in the audience should agree with you. I actually think you should put your stake in the ground, and if you upset some people, we'll stand by your knowledge. How do you go about communicating your value and then transferring that?
Well, so for me, it would seem really complicated because you've got someone who looks different, who challenges the system, who talks about these things that people don't understand. And so my value proposition when I talk to people about what they're going to get is, and I say, I guarantee 100% by the end that I've finished talking, you will have learned to think differently than you did before I started. Now, only you can evaluate whether adding another bow to your thinking process is valuable or not. And if you do think it's valuable, I 100% guarantee by the end I've finished, you will actually have tools and techniques that are going to help you think differently.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you think that, how much of our brain do you think we're using as humans?
Well, okay, awesome question. Because it's actually the antithesis of what I stand against. It's like, people love stats and figures to validate a point. And I go, I have no idea. I'm not a scientist how much brain is. Even if we did measure it, I would then go, show me the data, because I love data. Yeah. Show me the data, and I take in lots of data. So when I work with organizations, I will run organization psychology sessions. I'll get people input data. I'll look at business metric data. I'll look at a whole heap of data and wash that against a matrix. And so I say, when someone says, we're using, if anyone could say that they're using 62% of our brain, I go, okay, well, show me the data, and then show me how you validate that against an outcome. Because people get so caught up in statistics, not the solution.
Yeah.
And so I go, so to answer your question, I have no idea. But that I would then, typically if someone asked me that, I would go, in what context are you asking that for in terms of what's the solution that you're looking for? I would then push that back. Because for me, it's that people love to validate something because it makes them feel like they have the information. I go, okay, now you got the information, what's it for? So, and it just...
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad I poked the bear a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Let's take it in a different way then. In terms of the people that you work with, and you work with big companies, so you're working with people from who are just starting their working career to who have been in there forever. How many of the people you work with do you think are reaching their full potential?
Awesome question.
And what can people who aren't do about it?
So when I work through my sessions, I have a tool that's called Ask a 5-Year-Old. And I break things down. So no one's allowed to, they have to describe their role to a 5-year-old. And so when someone says, I reached full potential, instantly, my mind, I go into, and hopefully I'm not hijacking your conversation here, but I go, my mind, just the way up my process, I go into going, okay, what does full potential mean? Because I can't answer that unless I understand what full potential means. And I typically often see there's a process I run.
You're circling that back around to your
simplicity. So part of what I do and why I think it's successful is I don't answer questions, I question questions to help people answer their own questions. Yeah. So when someone says, and I know this is a different scenario, I'm just giving you an example, right? So if someone said, is that my team reaching their full potential? I go, I'm not sure. What is full potential? What does it mean? And they go, well, I'm not really sure. Well, they go, well, I don't know how I could answer your question if you don't know what this is. So why don't we define the North Star of what full potential is? Let's get that right. Let's get everyone a unified understanding of that. Then let's measure against it. Because it's so easy to go, look, this guy's not good enough, or we're not reaching our full potential. Okay, what does that mean? In a way, it's a buzzword because it's hard to measure. It's like, and I love words that are hard to measure because people love using them.
Yeah, they do, because they're not accountable.
Exactly. And that's why it's this sort of process. It's part of a facilitation process rather than, and a lot of work I do is facilitation, is trying to get people to reveal within themselves the answers. Because all of this stuff, I'll walk into a big company and I don't know anything about them. And I say, on purpose, I don't want to know anything about you. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm here to help see it through a different lens. And what I want to do is I want to uncover things through a process rather than coming up with a viewpoint straight away. Does that sort of make sense? I know it doesn't really answer your question, but it's it's just how I go about a process.
No, and I believe in it. I think what's really interesting about what you just said is you go into companies and you say, I don't want to know. I don't want to know about I've got a process, I'll put you through the process and the data will speak for what I can then measure and help you with. And I used to work in a similar way as a journalist. Yeah, the number one question when you want to interview people is, can you send me the questions? And it's like, well, I can send you a list of questions, but there's no guarantee that they're the questions I'm going to ask you on the day, because my next question is always based on the answer you delivered previously, because I listen.
Yeah.
And
well, it's fascinating. You talked about TEDx. So Tansal Ali, who put on TEDx, I've been asked to speak twice at TEDx, one in New York and one in Sydney when I got back from the US. And both times they wanted me to send my presentation and what my talk was about. They would vet it. It would have to sit within their 15, 16 minute window. All the rules that are around TED. And I don't work like that, so I just said, look, don't worry about that.
You break the rules, didn't you?
So I said, when Tansal rang me, I said, look, sorry, I just don't work like that. I can't speak at TED, unfortunately. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, well, the way I work, my design process, being an entertainer, have been for a long years, is I look at live audience input as a data input for the way I'm talking.
Yeah.
It's part of an input field. So I have some masthead things I want to talk about, but I'm using the art of improvisation. I use it in business and in public speaking. And so just like I do in music. But to be an improviser in music, you've got to know your stuff.
Yeah.
You can't just go on to make it sound any good. You've got to know the core principles. But I believe, and there's another talk I did at Paul's Fest called Being an Expert at Not Being an Expert. The concept of that talk is I teach experts to go beyond being expert, to throw the expert away, because the expert is a set of rules that they're measuring against, which stops them evolving, because they constantly will then challenge you going, that's not the way it is, because that's my expertise kicking in. And I'm saying you can't grow when you're an expert. It's a lot harder for you to grow when you're an expert than it is when you're not, because your whole ego, your whole business, everything around your identity is caught up in how you measure against a set of rules. Whereas innovation is about actually stepping beyond those rules. So it's that type, process I find very, very, very fascinating.
Yeah, and you've actually got me thinking as we're sitting here, like, am I positioning myself as an expert? Is that a worry?
Well, look, it's not. For you, it's not. And so it gets back to that thing where I say, I purposely don't want to know about your company. A little while ago, we talked about engaging an audience. These things engage an audience.
Yep.
You don't want to know about my company. Engagement, bang, got it. So for people who want to be keynote speakers, how do you create that engagement up front? I'll often tell a joke, pattern interrupt, break the energy. You're walking in often after someone or before someone, and it's about you on the stage. It's your time to shine. How do you change that energetic time? What is the first thing that comes out of your mouth to create that engagement?
Yeah.
And so things like when I walk into an organization and I go, see this, and they look at me and they go, yeah, and I go, innovation. And they're like it's a pattern interrupt, because they don't know how to answer it.
Yeah.
But it's like, is that innovation? Is it like that? But it's a great way to create engagement. Whether they like it or not, it changes their mental headspace of like, I'm in this space now. Because part of a lot of the workshops I do, half of the day is taken up by just breaking down ego and getting people united to a single viewpoint. It's quite an interesting bit of work.
Yeah, I think company culture is very interesting, and I think that comes in to keynote speaking. I think that's the same as well as with TEDx. Yes, we're interested in having you come and speak. What's your talk going to be about? Can I see it? Can I get your slides? And it's like, well, I've got a talk, but I like to get to presentations or events. I like to almost go the day before and wander around the audience and be part of the experience. And then my talk or my presentation is then shaped off what I see and the conversations that I have.
Yep.
And I also like when I'm on stage is that the end of my talk is not the end.
Yeah.
The end of my talk is actually, hopefully I've opened your minds to come and seek me out, and let's have a real discussion about your position and how you can change the way you communicate, rather than here's a one script fits all success to viral videos.
One thing I did in San Diego, I spoke at a big music conference, and the room was full of all the big wigs and they said, could you send your PowerPoint presentation beforehand because you're in a row of speakers? And so what I did was, with the art of being different, I sent my PowerPoint. My PowerPoint had one slide. And in big letters, you know, like the Wham t-shirts?
Yeah.
It had 3 words. I got out on stage and my PowerPoint came up and it said, big letters, look at him. So all these people are going, they looked at my slide and then they looked back at me. And they looked at my slide and they looked back at me, right? And and at the end of that, all these people were coming up going, oh my, that slide was unbelievable. Yet the organisers were arguing with me that it wasn't a PowerPoint. They go, that's not a PowerPoint. I went, oh, sorry, it was in PPT format. What? And they were going, no, but that's not how you do a PowerPoint. Oh, sorry, well, then how do you do a PowerPoint? But I created engagement through something so simple, you know.
And do you think there needs to be more of that? People who are prepared to, you know, challenge the vanilla.
What I
world.
think is that speaking should be fun. Number one, doesn't matter what topic you talk about. If you get up and you go, 62% of people in this state had, it's like, it's, to me, I just want to puke. I will walk out, like, because it's just, and I understand people are academic and I get that, but it's how do you turn that data, that's noise into signal? How do you boil it down so you've got all this stuff, and how do you turn it into something meaningful? And that's value. So when you look through the lines, this design thinking process, when you know the people in your audience are there to walk away with something of value, it's not about, look at me, 62%, and hopefully that they're going to try and mine all of that data and find something.
With a few stories linking it.
When you can turn it into a story, when you can turn it into a language that a 5-year-old would understand, and you can say, listen, I'm about to tell you all this stuff, but before I tell you this stuff, let me tell you a story about value. Yeah. Right? You've instantly created engagement. Then you talk about value, and then you start to telling a story. I would, in some of the pitches when I was pitching software a long time ago, I would start up the meeting without even them thinking that I started the meeting by dropping a piece of evidence that they didn't even know was evidence. So I'd be like, oh man, sorry, look, the rain today, blah, blah, blah. You know, on the car, I was hearing this thing about 15-year-old kids in school. I go, it's funny that, and they're like, oh yeah. I go, well, it's funny that you know, we talk about that because today I'm here to talk about how I solve that problem. Yeah. And, oh, okay. Rather than, oh, look, we got PDFs and we do, or I'm going to tell you about the deforestation climate. And it's like, you know, like how do we how do we create stories that create engagement?
You've put the map to the artifact on the table,
yeah,
without them even knowing that you put the map
correct,
to the artifact on the table.
And then rather than telling everything in the story, it's the art of simplicity. How do we boil it down to just the valuable bits? Yeah. So you could get on stage, like, how could you talk in 3 minutes and make it more powerful than a 20-minute talk? Yeah. I was once, when I was really young, I went to this thing called Tin Shed. It blew my mind. It's where I learnt about public speaking. They had a clock that had 1 minute on it, and you had to pitch your business in 1 minute. And they had a board of angel investors. This was Darling Harbour. Yeah, wow. I was about 17. The clock starts. We go, and those people are like, everyone gets up and has a chance. And then what we do is we do this. I mean, they send it through a server cloud, blah, blah, blah. This guy gets up. The whole place is packed. And he looked a bit like me. He's a bit raggedy, a bit sort of crazy. Clock starts. He goes, tick, 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 tick. And he goes, how you going? And the clock's at 15 seconds, right? 45 seconds to go. And everyone's like,
everyone's starting to panic for him.
Yeah. He goes, 20 seconds. He goes, you know this thing called the internet? Oh, he starts off, he goes, who's heard of Cirque du Soleil? All those people are like, it's 20 seconds, 25 seconds. He goes, well, I was the clown in this production. It's like 35 seconds. Everyone's going like, man, you got, and he goes, and I've travelled the world, met amazing people. You know this thing called the internet? If you want to know how to make a ton of money out of it, come see me. That was it. He was the first guy that got called up by all angels because he created engagement. No one knew what the hell he was talking about.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
But he realised his job wasn't to go and pitch everything. His job was to create engagement. Yeah. And because he was a clown in Cirque du Soleil, he realised as a performer, his job was to create. He could never possibly get in 1 minute across what they do. It's impossible. Yeah. So he realised the art of baiting. Yeah. And so I learnt that right back then because I was obviously touring and playing in bands, and I was like, that is super, super smart, you know.
And I think probably what he may have done there, he's turned it into an experience and a feeling, because people are starting to panic for him.
Correct.
So rather than thinking about what he's saying, they're actually feeling for him, so they're getting closer and being drawn in. And yeah, I think feeling's way more powerful than
when I got introduced to Richard Branson the first time, there was about 10 people selected, and I was one of them. And I went last, and everyone was in their suits and had business plans and all this sort of stuff. I had nothing. I had a long leather trench coat. All these people like, you know, and I just saw them, and he shook their hand and they went. Yeah. And then when I got up, Richard said, Richard, he goes, so who are you? I go, does it really matter? He goes, what? I go, well, look, I've got this business in America. I'm doing stuff. I said, listen, the thing about it is, next time you meet me, you'll know who I am, right? And he goes, oh, I've never heard anyone say that. I went, cool. And he goes, so do you like rugby? Because he was there for rugby. I went, no. And he goes, oh, I'm here for rugby. I went, that's cool, man. And he goes, well, let me tell you a bit of advice. I went, okay. And he goes, I have all these lawyers working for me. I just trust my gut and I do what I want. Follow your gut, follow your heart. I got off and everyone was like, what did he say? What did he say? And why was he talking to you? And I was like, I don't know. And the funny thing was then,
because you weren't boring him with
2
stuff.
years later, Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics invested in my business and we became good mates. And Richard Branson forwarded Dave Stewart's book on creativity in business. And Dave Stewart sent him an email about who I was, this guy. So it was interesting, that paradigm of, you know, but create connection. Go out the ordinary. If you do the same as everyone else, expect the same results. The power of different. One little thing creates memories. If you're true to yourself, if you have a message as a speaker, and it's honest, it's not just spewing out some data, they can go and get that from Google. How do you shape a story and put your own authenticity into it? To me, and then focus on connection. That's, to me, where the gold is.
And I think that's a great piece of gold to end this on. You've shared incredible value with the audience, so thank you.
My pleasure.
I just find, I think it's fascinating talking to you and just thinking. I always leave with 100 ideas in my mind running 100 miles an hour when we interact. So thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Now, of course, my thing is viral videos and how do you get people to spread. And part of this show with hashtag Keynote Speaker is that we also are going to try and create a spread. So where can this little show start, and in 12 months time where's it going to end up? And part of that is that I always let the guest choose the next guest. So it's up to you. Who do you think that this show needs to speak to next?
Well, in the art of being different, there's a lot of people I could connect with. I think for you, because it's not Los Angeles or something, I would say I'd like to put you in contact with Dominic Price. Do you know Dominic?
No.
Dominic's the head futurist at Atlassian.
Oh, wow.
And Dom's a really cool guy, and he's no BS, and he thinks about the future. He's about future workforces. He works in a very forward-thinking organisation, and I think he would be really someone to have some good input on this.
Awesome. I was reading about Atlassian the other day, talking about different workspaces and how they're doing it. That was in the news, and it was fascinating. And that company is such a beast. Like,
it's a beast, but it's a proud Australian company, but it's got smart. Like I love organisations that aren't afraid to engage with smart people if they look a bit different or they act a bit different. Yeah. And by talking to Dom, you'll know that the guy's really smart, but he's not your average sort of corporate thing, which I love. It's where I think all organisations.
I think it's a great example of what we were talking about previously. Is that, you know, there are so many software startup companies that were around when they started, but yeah, they were always different. Yeah. And look where they are. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Thank you, mate.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Now I'm going to go play with your dog. Pump up your dog. Shout out to your dog's
My
Instagram
dog's name
account.
is Smooshy Face Twinkle Toes. Of course, being a different person with a different dog name. SMOOSHIE, Face Twinkle Toes. He's a male chow chow, and he's sort of my partner in crime. We both have the same hairstyle.
He's way more famous than you.
He's way more famous than me, which is a good thing.
We'll put his link up on the screen or below. Go and give him a follow. He's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.